Hello and welcome to All Things Foster, a place for coffee, connection, and community. This is Season 1, Episode 6, and I want to take a minute to thank our sponsor, ETC Bookkeeping. ETC Business Services is a private company created in 2007 to manage bookkeeping, payroll, and tax services to help small business owners understand and manage their finances. Janie believes the economic value small businesses add to keep our country strong and is grateful to foster and adoptive families who give children a safe place to grow up. It's her privilege to donate to help Panhandle Orphan Care Network provide services to these families. You can find Janie at www.etcjaniethomas.com or email her at Janie, Janie, at etcjaniethomas.com. And I'll just tell you from a personal note that I am not an accountant by any stretch, and Janie's been super helpful to me, trying to help me understand QuickBooks and things like that. So we're super grateful for her sponsorship. And last week we had a great conversation with Bob Talley, his journey, where he shared his experiences fostering their daughter and then adopting, and everything was really, really special. So if you haven't heard it, check it out. So grab your coffee and join us as we welcome Julian Diaz to the podcast. Julian, thanks for being here today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, so tell us a little bit. Well, first I'm going to say today's podcast tackles a sobering but urgent topic, child trafficking, and how we as foster parents and community members can be more aware, more equipped, and more protective of our kids. So, Julian, tell us a little bit about you and about how you founded Mission 991.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I know that foster parents always hear a lot of those really, really scary statistics that are out there about human trafficking and runaways and all of that. And so part of what Mission 991's goal is to elaborate on the conversation around human trafficking, because when people hear that, they think immediately sex trafficking, because that's what Hollywood has pushed and everything else, and that's absolutely a part of all of this, and it elicits a very emotional response from people, which is why it kind of gets pushed out there as much as it does, and it gets the focus that it does. One is too many. So as long as there's somebody out there that needs help, we're going to continue pushing for that. But one of the goals at Mission 991 is to increase that conversation, or expand the conversation, I should say, from human trafficking to human exploitation.
Right.
Because there's so many ways that people are just being taken advantage of and being exploited, from labor trafficking to grooming and sextortion, some of the topics we may get into today. But there's a lot of things out there in this very, very distracting world, kind of pulling on everybody's attention all the time. And that includes our children. Mm-hmm. And so we need to be smarter about how we go about protecting our children. And so with Mission 991, I was doing a lot of work with another organization, a much bigger kind of corporate-minded organization, nonprofit. And I saw the same problems that were frustrating me there as when I was a federal agent working for the government, that the police work, even though it's very necessary, and I absolutely support all of our law enforcement, it's one of the big things that we do here at Mission 991, it's still very reactionary. Mm-hmm. You're not doing a whole lot of proactive work. So it really ultimately feels like you're playing whack-a-mole. It's like you take down one group and they unfortunately just go and get more kids, more women, more whatever it is, the product that they're selling, and the cycle continues. So one of the things we're hoping to do at Mission 991 is to increase that awareness, like I said, to expand the conversation to human exploitation, as well as get rid of some of those myths, those Hollywood ideas of what human trafficking is, so that people can be better prepared to defend themselves and their families.
Sure. So why did you start Mission 991? I mean, where you said you were working for another nonprofit, and you wanted to be more proactive. Is that why you started it?
Yeah. Also, the organization, there's always going to be some tension between how things are done, right? So it's kind of nice to have my own organization at that point in my time
Yeah.
to be able to take one hat off and put the other one on and just continue the work, right? Ultimately, I really wish, and you've probably experienced this in your organization as well, that all nonprofits could just link arms and really become an army for the good of the community.
Absolutely.
Fortunately, there's a scarcity mindset among nonprofits, as well as churches and other community organizations, and so they tend to stay very isolated. They don't share information very well, and sometimes they don't play in the sandbox as well as they should. And so it was kind of nice at that point in time to just have my own organization so that I could pursue some of the things that I felt were not being addressed.
Yeah.
Part of that was the awareness part, being out there, because I don't believe in, most of my work right now is in the Central and Latin American region,
Wow.
but I don't believe in going 2,000 miles away to go do something that you're not able to do or willing to do in your own backyard, right?
Sure.
So this allowed me to work in my own backyard, and address some of those issues. One of the systemic issues that I see is the lack of mental health resources for at-risk victims or potential victims, because there's a lot of, and there should continue to be a lot of resources for victims to address the healing necessary once they're identified as being exploited, once they're identified as human trafficking victims. It takes a lot of resources to begin that healing process, which is oftentimes a lifetime of healing and work. But there's also a lot of individuals that need assistance. And, this can go into the conversation there with like fostering, because part of what I do is assist local law enforcement and assist families that don't feel like their case is being heard, to find their missing people. And a lot of times we'll find these missing youths, return them home, and then that's kind of the end of the story. But there's a reason that this child felt unsafe, or maybe they weren't running from something, they were running to something, but regardless, that needs to be addressed, right? So more resources, I think, on the proactive side of things before the years of exploitation occur.
Yeah, absolutely. So when did you start Mission 99.1?
Well, it's been probably about 4 years or so. 2020 was a year that really kind of blew the lid on a lot of the digital exploitation that's been going on. There was a 26%, actually. Yes, I always like to have my numbers open because I don't like just throwing arbitrary numbers out there. But there was an immediate 26% increase in the number of digital human trafficking exploitation cases that centers were getting, and those numbers, that's a very conservative number. A lot of it kind of goes up from there, but with people being locked at home, a lot of people went online to address their boredom, their needs, their isolation, their depression, and we all know that pornography continues to be a huge problem, not just for men, but women across the world in the United States. And so that led to an uptick in exploitation on the digital side of things. So it was about that time that I started wanting to really increase the awareness on parental controls. And so many parents out there just feel so overwhelmed by the apps and the programs, and they feel like they need to have a computer science degree to control these things. And my response to those parents is, if you're that overwhelmed, just take them away. These kids do not need to have all this access. But if you're not going to, then there are some very easy steps that parents can take to shore up those defenses at home.
Right. Wow. So about 4 years. Is that about 5? Right? You said 2020.
For Mission 991, yes. When I was I joined the military when I was 17 as a military police officer. I quickly rose because of the war. A lot of things were moving, at a very fast pace. And so I found myself at the age of 19 as a sergeant and getting placed on a narcotics team. And from there, I started working with the Criminal Investigation Division, CID. And that's where I was exposed to a lot of this. I won't claim to have done a ton of work in all of it there in CID. However, that was an exposure to just the severity of the issues. That, and I grew up as a farm worker, as a Hispanic migrant farm worker. And so I saw the labor side of things. I saw some of the struggles that families were going to and the lengths that some parents will go through to put food on the table. And so, seeing all of that, then going through the global war on terrorism, many years of kind of going back and forth. And I stepped away from it for a little while because I was, in Iraq or Afghanistan dealing with evil, because that's essentially what we're discussing.
Yep.
A certain way. And then 18 hours later, I'd be home and I'd have to be careful how I put the handcuffs on. I'd have to read you your Miranda rights and all that. And I'm like, guys, like evil's evil, man. So I walked away from it for a while, kind of frustrated with the system. And it was years later as a pilot that individuals from that world still knew my name and still knew me, and so they started calling me to see if I would work with them, because I had already done a lot of work with nonprofits previously. And so I was able to join up with some of these guys that were just doing some fantastic work, and it just kind of snowballed from there.
Right. Wow, that's awesome. So help us understand the scope, right? What is child trafficking, human trafficking, look like in our country? I mean, everybody talks about it, or some people at least talk about it as a problem over there. Like, that's not happening here. I mean, what is the scope of trafficking?
Yeah, it's a great question. And unfortunately, when you start to dig into it, and it's not something that we're going to be able to lay out entirely in one podcast, but hopefully this will intrigue some people to get in the books or start doing their own research. And you're going to find various numbers. They're very skewed sometimes depending on where you're getting, what sources you're pulling from, because the reality is that this is a very underground kind of dark network kind of stuff that we're talking about, right? Nobody wakes up one day and they're like, hey, you know what I want to be when I grow up? I want to be a human trafficker,
Yeah, right.
or be trafficked or whatever. So there's definitely a skew to the reporting and the statistics. So I just want to say that up front. But from what the United Nations and a lot of these other organizations have pulled together, there's estimated right now about 46 million people that are involved or victims of human trafficking of some sort.
Gosh.
And that, I mean, we're talking the population of the state of Idaho, right?
Right.
And the rebranding that has occurred. So, we've had a previous conversation, and I know we kind of see eye to eye on some of the spiritual side of things as well. Human trafficking to me is it's when the spiritual warfare kind of bleeds over into our physical realm, right?
Yeah.
Because ultimately, regardless kind of where people stand spiritually, you can't deny the fact that it's when an individual has been broken in mind, body, and soul. And ultimately what we're talking about is slavery.
Yeah.
But it's been rebranded.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just slavery by a different name. Yeah.
And so it takes many, many forms. And it's a very kind of complicated issue because of that. One of the places I'll direct people is the Polaris Project. If they go to polarisproject.org, I believe it is, then there's a lot of statistics on there. They do a great job of putting up like the most frequently spoken myths about human trafficking and then kind of a response to them. So it's a really good place for people to get educated. One of the things they do also is every single year they'll put up the 25 most common industries that involve human trafficking. And again, there's sex trafficking, and then there's labor trafficking and other various forms of exploitation. The statistically by numbers, labor trafficking is the biggest problem. But again, sex exploitation is where an individual is being forced into sexual acts through force, fraud, or coercion, and that kind of elicits that bigger emotional response from people, right?
Sure.
So some of those industries, though, would really surprise people. I mean, some of them are ones that people would immediately think of: massage parlors or agricultural, pornography. These are all industries, right? That people need to understand when they participate. Say pornography, it's not a victimless crime. Like, you're not just logging in and woohoo, high five, right? Like,
Right.
there's someone else on the other end of that camera, and that person has a story, they have a name, they have a family, and you have to really understand the kind of spider web that goes out from there. And ultimately, it always comes down to the money, right? That's what it tracks down to. So the Polaris Project is a fantastic place to get some more information on that sort of thing. But there are, millions of individuals around the world that are being, again, the definition of human trafficking through force, fraud, or coercion, being coerced or forced into labor or sexual acts that go against what, their wishes, against their free will.
Yeah. Wow. Whew. That's a heavy stuff, man. It is a heavy. So do you know what is it that makes a kiddo more susceptible or vulnerable to being trafficked? I mean, are they looking for something? What is it that draws kids into being trafficked?
Yeah, that's a great question. It looks different for every single person, but the way that I address this is I see it kind of the industry of human trafficking for people to understand from micro to macro, right? So down from the individual on the other end of a screen being groomed all the way up to the monstrous industry of human trafficking and exploitation that's occurring across the world. And it really is an industry. I mean, it's billions of dollars every single year.
Yeah.
And so when we're looking at the industry of human trafficking, if you think of kind of like a three-legged bar stool, right? It's very sturdy. But if you take one of those legs out, the whole thing topples over, right? So within that, you've got the traffickers, kind of the I always tell people, I won't say any names, but like think of the largest real like storefront that you can think of, right? Across the world. And then you decide one day, I'm going to take them out of business. Not compete with them, but take them out of business. How would you approach that, right? So on one hand, you got to make it harder for them to set up their business, right? Harder for them to market, harder for them to tell the world that they're there, right? Because you want to cut the money off. And so you do that through legislation. You do that through increasing police, law enforcement capabilities, and all of that. That's the bigger picture. The other thing, so that's one leg. And then the other leg is addressing the clients. So I don't care how I do it at the end of the day. Like I said, I do a lot of work with Central American countries. It's not that we're like isolated there, but through connections and just demand, it's what draws most of my time and energy right now. So we have some memorandums of agreement with various law enforcement entities there. And so we assist them with intelligence gathering operations and training so that they can increase their capabilities, right? A lot of times these traffickers, especially when we're talking about sex trafficking in the Caribbean, Latin American region, they're catering to Americans. So it takes an American to come down there for them to really interact with. So we'll go down there and do that. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, when we're talking about these clients, I don't care why they're no longer engaging in human trafficking or purchasing, peddling flesh. There's different ways people say about it. But so if through arrests and putting out in social media and news networks that this is being aggressively attacked, they turn away out of fear fine. I don't care at the end of the day. But ultimately, it involves just bringing back that moral compass, the ethics and morality to the family, to where we can teach our children who will one day become adults that you just don't treat another human being that way, right?
Yeah.
And it starts with just bringing Jesus back into the home, right?
For sure.
And so that's the simple answer, but not easy, right? The simple answer is just bring Jesus back into the conversation, and we can address a whole lot of these issues. Now, the third leg of that is the victim themselves, and that's ultimately what we're talking about, right? So with the victim, you also have needs, and what happens is that the traffickers, the groomers, they will become that need for that individual. So we all have needs, and again, I see it as a kind of a tripod. It's mind, body, and soul, right? So if I'm physically needing something, so I don't have a whole lot of money, resources, then the trafficker becomes the money. They become the resources. If I have physical wants and needs, like new pair of shoes, that whole glamour and all that, that's what they become. And they'll do that until they kind of get that hook in, right?
Yeah.
And then if they're kind of weak in mind, well, then you're just kind of susceptible to being groomed anyways, because you just don't have the information.
Yeah.
But when it comes to children, now we're talking about maturity, right? So a lot of these children just aren't mature enough. And that's why they need these protections, and parents need to be more actively involved. But when we're talking about these devices, it's a two-way street. And I put it to my daughter this way, because this is all stuff that I deal with at home as well. I'm looking at her. She was arguing with me. She was probably 14 at the time or something. And I'm like, you wouldn't feel safe if I went and dropped you off in the middle of a bus station at 2 a.m., surrounded by 500 strangers, right? And just left you. Like, why would I do that as your father?
Right.
And you wouldn't feel safe there either. Are all 500 of those people going to hurt you? No. Some of them are even going to step in and protect you. But there are individuals in that crowd that, given the opportunity, would take advantage of you, right?
Yeah.
And that's just statistics. That's just the numbers. And when you open that device, you go to your bedroom and you're in isolation, you close that door, that's exactly what's happening. And it's even worse because digitally, our children can be targeted. So every time that username comes up, that groomer, that person gets an alert, and they know, Susie's online, Jessica's online. And so they can target that individual. And of course, those targeting campaigns are getting more sophisticated with the introduction of like AI and things like that. So there's the maturity and mental side of things, and just kind of the awareness of it. And then there's also the spiritual side of things, because they're one of the kind of segments of human trafficking that isn't spoken about a whole lot anymore, but you still see it rise here and there, is the kind of cultish behavior, the use of religion sometimes to entice or control individuals. And that takes on various forms. There's a pretty big case that just came up in Guatemala that we assisted with about a year ago, involving a Jewish synagogue kind of thing. There were some out in Utah with the Mormons, some of the more traditional, sects there. There's obviously the Muslim community we've done a ton of work with in like the Middle East and stuff like that, with some of the abuse and exploitation that occurs there, and as well as some of the satanic cults, we still today, I mean, this is 2025, and we're still dealing with cases in South Africa and regions like that where there's child sacrifice and things of that nature. So that's completely on one end of the spectrum, but there's everything in between as well. And I'm not calling out individual peoples or cultures, but it's a global issue.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Yeah, you said 46 million,
I believe,
right? 46 million kids people that are being trafficked. I mean, that's just awful. So in my
I'm sorry,
thought,
26 million.
how many?
26 million.
26. Okay, 26. I thought it was 46, but still 26 million is a lot of people.
I'd say 46 is probably closer to it. Like I said, it's so underreported.
Yeah. Yeah. And you only have the numbers once you catch them, basically, right? And then, so in my thought, children that are in foster care have I would think that they would be more susceptible to being groomed than, say, a child that's been with his parents in a safe and loving, stable home their entire life. Would you? I mean, that would be an accurate statement, right?
Yes. And the reason that I believe that's true is that when I deal with some of the victims and we talk about some of these things, a lot of it is rooted in identity. And I believe a lot of these kids, when they move around as much as they do inside the foster care network, they lack an identity. And there's always, it's inside all of us, that we want to be accepted. And so when you're moving from place to place, I see this all the time in military families as well, just growing up in the, or having been in the military, that kids will go to extraordinary lengths to fit in. And that really exposes them to a lot of malicious behavior or elicits that, well, how far are you ready to go,
Wow. So there's a whole process in getting a kid that I don't know into a situation where they're being trafficked, right? And so there's this, they call it grooming, right? So there's this whole grooming kind of, if you can lay out what does that look like? I mean, the kids go into a chat room. Are they just liking and commenting on videos on YouTube? What is the process of being groomed kind of generally look like?
Well, all the above, right? When think of in your life the last time that you encountered a salesman that just was really, really good at his job, right? You walk in wanting to buy a white minivan and you walk out with a black 4x4 F-150, right?
Yeah, right.
So we are all susceptible to a certain level of manipulation, enticement, motivation, right? And that's what's happening to these kids. And again, I got to go back to when we're talking about the kids, it's a maturity thing as well. And one of the biggest problems is the identity crisis that's gripping our culture today, especially in the United States, but across the world. And I believe part of that comes from, if I grow up in small town Alabama, then chances are by the time I'm 18, 19 years old, I look like, talk like, dress like small town Alabama, right? Because that's the identity there.
Right.
When you introduce the internet, which a lot of people fail to realize, especially children today, if they're listening, that they think the internet was just always there. We still don't know what the long-term effects of all this exposure is for people, for families, for our community and culture, because it really wasn't accessible on that level till 2005-ish. And then it really blew up in 2020 again. Like that was another kind of spike. So we still don't know what the long-term effects of this is going to be on our culture. But what I'm seeing in the work that I do is that there's a lack of identity. So children, for the most part, they're little bad idea factories. It's like their job, right? And it was for us too growing up. It's like I had this really terrible idea. In my mind, I'm like, dude, this is going to be so cool.
It'll be great.
Yeah. And so then you have these certain levels or gateways, right? So I tell my friends and they're like, dude, that's stupid. Like, don't do that, right? Or they hype you up, one or the other. And then, you got your siblings, you got your aunt, your uncle, your mom, your dad, your coaches, your teachers. And if you're from, again, just kind of small town Alabama, then most of them are going to be in line with each other, right? In their way of thinking and what we do here. And there's good and bad to that. but we can't be so naive about the bad, the other side of this coin, because what's happening today, kids come up with a bad idea, their parents tell them, oh, I don't like that answer, so I'm going to go talk to my friends at school.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe they say no. Oh, all right. Well, I still don't like the answer, so I'm going to go online. And
Mm-hmm.
now I'm going to find 500 weirdos. I'm small town Alabama talking to inner city people from LA or New
Yeah.
York City who have no concept of what it's like to be me in my small town, and they have no skin in the game. They couldn't care what happens to you. But you find 500 of them that tell you that's a great idea.
Right. Yeah.
That's amazing. Like, you shouldn't listen to your parents. They're small minded. They don't know what they're talking about. So we end up with this culture today of people shopping around for the answers that they're looking for, and I think that that's impacting our children the most, because they lack that maturity. They don't have that identity concrete yet, and they're
Mm-hmm.
still kind of just reaching for it, So when groomers encounter these individuals, it's that small, hook, and then it just starts off as a conversation, because most of our children, stranger danger. Well, we play a video game together for a while. I'm not a stranger anymore, right? Like,
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm your buddy. You can tell me. And then they start to open up. Well, I'm really upset with my mom right now. I really wish that I had new shoes. It's embarrassing when I go to school and this, and that, and then say, well, I'll take care of you. And so they develop this trust, and then it kind of goes from there. So and right now I'm kind of focused and talking about like the sexual exploitation that occurs,
Mm-hmm.
because one of the things that parents need to get more understanding of is sextortion.
Mm-hmm.
So there's obviously, it's rare, but it does still occur where an individual will be sexually exploited physically. But it's
Mm-hmm.
becoming way, way, way more common to see digital exploitation occur.
Yeah. I worked with a guy, and his wife was a principal at a. It was an elementary school that went up to sixth grade, I believe. Whatever, the child was in sixth grade, and the boyfriend asked her to send him a picture, and then that picture ended up all over the school, right? And so you know that that they had to involve the police. It was a huge, huge mess. So yeah, I mean, it happens
Hmm.
everywhere.
And it's a large uptick in youth going to the extremes of suicide,
Hmm.
and other things like that, just out of shame and guilt over these events.
Yeah.
I want to tell parents that they so there are some tools available. The
Hmm.
National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, NCMEC. If you go to their website, they have a lot of training tools. They even have videos, like cartoons in multiple languages, that you can show even elementary age kids,
Hmm.
and they kind of, in a cartoon way, teach them, like, okay, would this be a good idea to share online? Would this
Yeah.
be okay if someone asked me to do this? And they can kind of go through and look at some of those resources. One of them also is they have individuals that can assist in retrieving some of that digital information.
Really.
Yeah. So if like a picture or a video gets released out there,
Mm.
they can pull that information. It's not, it's the internet. So we have to be
Right.
realistic of the capabilities, but there are people out there that are trained in doing that. And another resource that I'll give people is Protect Young Eyes.
Hmm.
Protectyoungyes.org is, I have no affiliation with them. I just think that they have a fantastic product. They have a website. It's a Christian-based organization, and what they do is evaluate all these apps. So if your kid comes home and says, I'm on Kick or whatever, and I just totally
Hmm.
made that up, but it could
Right.
be something real. And as a parent, you're like, what? What is
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
You can go there and they have all these applications, games, and things like that. And they do a very good job of kind of giving you a layout of like pros and cons and potential issues with it. They have some training information there as well. So there are definitely resources that people can go to. Another one that you can do is Google Dirty Dozen. And that one is I want to get it right, the endsexualexploitation.org. Dirty Dozen is a list that they put up every single year where they will address kind of big corporate mindset. So these are individuals that will go and fight at Capitol Hill. So I'm a grunt, like I talked about. I grew up in the Army, and I'm still out there just kind of slugging away where I can at this problem. And it seems like we're not going to get anywhere sometimes. I was just talking to the team that I work with in Central America, and the way that, they're kind of down. Motivation is hard to keep up sometimes when you're dealing with all of this. But I told him, it's kind of like going to the ocean and trying to empty the ocean with a water bucket. It sounds ridiculous, right? You're never going to put a dent into the ocean. But if I scoop up a fish, then it's a life-changing event for that fish, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we got to keep it focused on that individual. So when we do that, we can kind of focus those resources. Ultimately, that's where Mission 991 comes from. I named it after Matthew 18, the parable of the sheep. So we leave the 99 to go after the one. Because ultimately, the resources, the time, the energy, if it works once, we got to keep going, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And this organization for the Dirty Dozen, in 2020, they're a collection of lawyers and attorneys, and they do the stuff that I can't do, right? But it requires a team. And they released in 2020 all these Chromebooks. So all the schools went online, and they just gave everybody a Chromebook.
Yeah.
And there were no parental controls on them, nothing. And so they went after Google. They'll go after Apple. They'll go after these huge organizations. And they're now the reason that, they were one of the motivators for all those changes that occurred to where all those Chromebooks have parental controls on them now. So to go back to the original question, how does somebody kind of fall into that grooming? It's really just depends on the individual and what they open up about. And some of these organizations, I won't say all of them, some of them are literally just, that guy in grandma's basement still just, plugging away at a computer and getting what he can get. But there are some of these networks that are incredibly sophisticated.
Yeah, right.
And there's a group of 15 individuals sitting around a table, and I've seen where they will entice somebody and start kind of that conversation. And I had a case where this woman, so the husband came to me and said, "Hey, I've got $14,000 missing from my bank account. Can you look into this?" And the wife had engaged in a kind of like an emotional relationship, I guess you could say, online. So nothing physical, but she was talking to this guy that she thought was her friend, and then that led from one thing to another to, well, I'm a single dad, I'm struggling, I don't have money for my kid, I'm just doing my best, that sort of thing. So $20 here for gas, $200 here for utilities, it just kind of snowballs.
Right.
And then I get involved, and I immediately identify the photographs of the individual that she thought she was talking to were actually from a lesser known reality TV show guy. And so that was immediate, red flag number one, if there weren't already enough in this. But then I end up finding the true identity of this individual is a 350-pound Kenyan woman that she thought was this built, jacked, 30-year-old guy.
Yeah.
And what happens is they're sitting around a table, and this is their job. Like, people don't realize this. This is what they do for a living.
Uh-huh.
And there's 10 of them around the table, and I've seen it as sophisticated as, well, my sister would really like to get to know you, and then they kind of point around the table and like, hey, and so that person across the table is now the sister in the equation, and they'll build this whole fake life.
Yeah.
And when 35, 40-year-old professionals, I'm talking teachers, lawyers, I've done some work with, there was a doctor, they fall for these things.
Yeah.
Because again, we're all human. We all have spiritual, physical, and emotional needs. And when you're in that crisis and searching, it's easy to latch on to that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then these individuals will kind of pull them in, and if they can get a photograph, if they can get a video, then, like you said earlier, they'll start holding that over your head. Well, if you don't give me what I want, then, I'm going to show your parents, I'm going to show your school, everyone's going to know what you do.
Yeah. Gosh dang. So are there, what are some of the like most used, or is this even available? I don't know. The most used apps that groomers tend to use. Is it just all of them? Is there some that are more specific than others?
All of them, honestly. So one of the things that parents should always keep an eye on is user-generated content, UGC. So any app, any application at all that has user-generated content has the potential for exploitation, as well as pornography and other things like that. I'm not sure if they shored this up yet. I hope that they did. But at one point in time, or still even, Spotify was allowing people to upload things, and their program would catch the audio because they didn't want copyright issues with their music and stuff like that, right? But there was nothing in place to check their videos. So people were uploading pornography with other audio attached to it, and your kids would be opening that up. Another one was Apple. Again, I'm not sure that they were on the Dirty Dozen list last year for this, but there were no checks and balances to uploading content. So if I create an application, they do have parental controls, right? So you can say nothing, my kid can only download stuff up to the age 10. Yeah. Well, who decides age 10, right? What's appropriate? Yeah. So they were allowing people to upload apps and assign their own categories to them without kind of vetting that. So anything with user-generated content is an immediate red flag. Anything that allows chats and things, a lot of these groomers will try at the first opportunity they get to move the conversation. So they'll link up with Roblox is terrible for this. So Roblox is a game that kids will jump on and play, and they have sex parties on there. I mean, it's all digital, but they'll dress up like furries and jump into these chat groups, and they'll meet up in certain location within the like Roblox world, and they'll start this conversation and try to move it off of that platform. And a lot of times where they're going for is platforms that are end-to-end encrypted.
Right, like Signal or something like that.
Yeah, Signal, WhatsApp. WhatsApp became owned by Facebook, and Facebook Messenger is actually now end-to-end encrypted as well. And it was a huge thing that people fought because I say we, but the tip lines, national tip lines used to get a lot of tips from Facebook. Well, now it's end-to-end encrypted, so big corporate Facebook can wash their hands and say, I don't know anything about that.
Yeah.
And so there's no accountability there. That's kind of what I think parents should immediately look for. There's just, to me, at the end of the day, I mean, there's no good reason for children to have that much access 24/7 unsupervised.
Yep. Yeah. I agree. So how do they are there, I mean, I personally tried various parental controls and this, that, and the other thing, and we continued to have issue after issue. I'd find out about this and then figure out how to block that and then find out about the, but are there good ways that will prevent and stop a chunk, like a good percentage, or is there, you have
Yeah,
recommendations on that?
there are apps and programs out there. Some of them are paid. One of them, as an example, is Bark, Bark, and they sell their own phone. They have their own built-in program that will block things. And another thing that I think they do great, which there are other companies like this, they also sell like a little box that plugs into your Wi-Fi router. And so now you can network all of your devices within your home, and it's a whole lot better than nothing, right? But
Yeah.
it's still not perfect. I mean, some of these kids are pretty good at
Yeah.
getting around their parental controls, but so it starts with, I mean, at the very least, I think parents out there, you can't shore up every possible thing. So I think it requires a multi-layered approach. If they're gonna get access to my children, I'm for damn sure not gonna make it easy on them. Right.
Yeah.
So I need to set up as many roadblocks as possible. So that includes screen time where physically the children can get onto their devices. So like I was saying,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so it requires a multi-layered kind of approach to this, right? So in the digital side of things, like I'm not going to make it easy for them to access my children. So that's where you can use programs like Bark and parental controls, Norton antivirus. There's a bunch out there. And a really good place if parents are feeling very overwhelmed by that is I want to give them this. It's a YouTube channel, and again, no affiliation with them, but it's Family Tech, and it's this woman. She's a mother, and she, by profession, she's like a engineer or something like that. She does all these big networks for corporations, and she saw a need for this, so she puts out videos on and just step by step walking parents through how to set up all these parental controls.
Oh, that's good.
So you can do all these layers to your network to set up these defenses, and then comes in the spiritual side of things, right? So I think that a family should be plugged into community, plugged into church, because individuals around you are going to identify problems before you do, because you see your kids every single day, and as parents we want to see and hope the best from them, right? And also children are going to open up to other individuals in ways that they're just not going to open up to their parents. So the parents should have a community wrapped around those children, wrapped around themselves, and for many, many reasons, but that being one of them, as well as the spiritual side of things of just having an ethical, moral compass. There's so many children that don't have that anymore, So right from wrong, and if there is wrong, do we have a relationship that you can come to me and you can talk to me? Or at least can you go talk to somebody, right? Then on the emotional side of things, another defense layer there is openly discussing with your children, obviously age appropriate, but some of the things that they can expect to go through in puberty, some of the struggles that they're going to encounter with easy access to pornography and what that does to you, Like if you start throwing out the actual statistics of pornography out there to some of these young men, I'd bet they'd think twice about it, right? So erectile dysfunction doesn't sound real fun at 25 years old, things like that. So parents need to educate themselves so that they can educate their children. But there should be a multi-faceted approach to this where you're trying to address each of those levels, because each of those levels becomes a vulnerability. The maturity side of things on the emotional part as well includes discussions of shame and guilt, because ultimately in a world that we are plugged in 24/7 and there are cameras everywhere, there's going to be a time and place where you are embarrassed and something is out there on social media. And children need to know how these kind of like wildfires just blaze on social media, but they die down, like
Yeah.
it might be really embarrassing for 3 days, maybe even 3 weeks, but it's gonna be okay. It does not require a drastic life altering response to that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would tell parents is just to really sit down with your spouse, sit down with everyone that has a vested interest or time and access to your children, and just start layering those defenses. Some of them are physical, some of them are emotional, some of them are spiritual. And if you leave any one of those out, it becomes a potential place for groomers to kind of set a hook in and start chipping away.
Yeah. Ultimately, we and this is kind of a theme for the conversations I've been having here lately, but it's community. The whole reason that we talk about on this All Things Foster, a place for coffee, connection, and community, because we do better in community. And like you said, being part of a regular group consistently helps identify when there's issues, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah,
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I mean, my responsibility as a parent is to be your parent, not your
yeah,
friend, not your
yeah,
buddy.
yep, yeah, yeah. We have a thing at the house, and I can't remember exactly what it says, but I'm your parent, and it's not my job to be your friend, but I'm gonna come after you when you're gone and you've lost and all the things. It's really kind of humorous, but also kind of accurate. Like we you can't parent your kids as like your friend. I mean, you have a role and a responsibility to your children to raise them up in the way of the Lord, right? And lead, guide, and direct them into a relationship with God, into safety and security and things like that. So
Absolutely.
we talked about the conversations you should be having, you talked about the resources. Remind me again. It was NCMEC.
Yes, and NCMEC, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They have a national hotline, tip line, that is primarily for the minorities and things like that. But I mean, if you reach out, they'll direct you where you need help. And there's other national tip lines like the Blue Campaign for Homeland Security. There's another place that people can go to for resources and for making reports, as well as just calling up Mission 991. It's what I do. So I can help direct people where they need for additional resources as well.
And then you said Protect Young Eyes is another one.
Mm-hmm.
And then the YouTube channel Family Tech. And I'm gonna put links to all these down in the description below. And we'll get to them being able to contact you here in a little bit. But what are there things that schools, churches, and communities can do to watch out for signs? Are there signs that they could be looking for to say, oh, that's a potential, that child is, acting out in a way that could show that they're being trafficked?
Yeah, there are some kind of well-known indicators, and the problems with these is that people assume that that's an end-all be-all, but it's really not. It takes so many different forms and ways that people are being exploited. So I just want people to be very open-minded. So some of the better known ones are tattoos. So if you start seeing a bunch of kids or women all with the exact same tattoo, it's not an immediate indicator, none of these are, that they're being trafficked. But that in conjunction with substance abuse and behavioral issues and other things like that could be an indicator. So the part of it is societal. So when we glamorize, certain behaviors like, hey, what's up, pimp? What's up, ho? We just use these words and just throw them around. It's, if you really knew what those people were like in real life, like that's not something to be proud of.
No.
So tattoos, markings, branding of any kind. If you see an individual who historically or you know that person has struggled financially and all of a sudden they got brand new shoes, they got brand new purse, brand new, makeup and jewelry, well, it's coming from somewhere, right? And so changes in behavior, declining grades, substance abuse, physical markings, bruises, things like that are all indications that I would hope somebody would just step in and have a conversation with somebody, right?
Yeah.
And it's really, really important that people understand that it's everywhere. There's no stereotypical pedophile. There's no stereotypical trafficker or victim. I don't remember her name, but a really well-known case of this, that because she speaks openly about it, is there's a story of this young woman who moved around because of her father's corporate job. They found themselves in, I believe it was Detroit or Ann Arbor up in Michigan, and Catholic family, very well dressed. They had money, they had all the things. But again, going back to some of those reasons people fall into this, she really just wanted to fit in. And so there was a cute boy and she wanted his approval, right? And so in middle school, straight A student, she decides to catch a ride home. Maybe it was like ninth grade, 10th grade. And he's going to give her a ride home. Well, just quick stop. I'm going to stop by the house. And so, hey, do you want a drink? She comes in because she's seeking that approval. And then that turns into a relationship. Well, that turns into getting out a camcorder where now he's got video of her, right? And he starts holding that over her head. Well, that turns into favors for friends. So now there's she's being raped by multiple individuals, and then that turns into her sneaking out at night at 2:00 in the morning without her parents knowing, because she got a phone call that if you don't get here in 15 minutes, we're going to release these videos. Jeez. And that turns into years of trauma and abuse and exploitation in high school, right under the parents' noses.
Wow.
Her grades are dropping and nobody knows why. They think she's just stressed. She can't sleep. And ultimately, it becomes kind of a sliding scale where now this individual will start seeking out substances and become addicted to drugs and alcohol just to escape. Yeah. So it takes various forms, and somebody just stepping in and breaking that cycle. You know, in aviation, we talk about the Swiss cheese model for accidents. So when you have an accident that requires the FAA to step in, they start looking at all the things that led up to that event, right? And so everything had to, like the Swiss cheese model, you got these Swiss cheese slices and all these holes, and they all have to align perfectly for this event to happen. And so they ask, which one of these can we shift to prevent this from ever happening again?
Yeah.
And I think that's the important thing for parents, for teachers, for even young people listening to this, and you have friends around you that are struggling, is you can be that shift. You can disrupt that timeline, that pattern of abuse, and that's ultimately what we're trying to accomplish.
Wow. Gosh, this is some heavy stuff. So what gives you hope? I I know you said it's just that one more kid, that one more person that's being trafficked. Is it, because this has got to be heavy work to do day in and day out.
Yeah. To me, it always goes back to that the answer is simple but not easy. And the simple answer is we just keep swinging, right? Because the only thing it takes for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing.
Yeah.
I have to be realistic. I am one of millions over the last thousands of years that have been fighting this since the days of Cain and Abel, since the introduction of the fall, where I'm not naive that in my lifetime I'm going to see just an end of evil or an end of exploitation, but I'm not going to sit back and do nothing. So some of the best advocates and biggest fighters in this space are victims. So if I can leave a legacy of pulling people up out of the exploitation that's occurring, that they're being held over with labor and sexual exploitation, then that individual can go out and help other people as well, take their story out there or use their resources to improve their community. And if I can do that 1,000 times before I'm gone, then I can multiply that effect, right?
Yeah.
So it's really that legacy of just, being too stupid to quit.
Yeah.
I think too, it's just keeping the perspective, like with Mission 991, there's a lot of organizations out there that really market and push that emotional connection in order to drive up funding. And we're just not that. I could use a lot of help with resources, yes, but also just people that want to get involved that don't know how, because they look at this and they're like, well, you used to be a federal agent, you used to be in the military, obviously you can go fight this thing. Well, so can you if you're working at Best Buy. So can you if you're, a teacher or an engineer or whatever, a lawyer. It takes all types to get involved. And so, Mission 991 and other organizations like Cabot International and all these guys that are out there doing great work, we still need people to help out with social media. We still need people to answer emails, set up meetings and digital production and writing reports, all of it. It's an organization.
Yeah.
So if people want to volunteer, they can get involved with Mission 991 as well. And if not, then resources help as well. If you're like, well, I can't go out and find people on the dark web. Okay, but I know somebody that can. They're trained and they have the experience to, but they have a family of their own as well. So if I can pay them, the salary required for them to go and chase these children digitally for 8 hours or 10 hours, then, that we can employ that individual with that skill set, and that requires resources.
Yeah.
So I always tell people, do what you do and do it to the best of your ability. If you are a baker, then be the best baker you can for your community, be the best car salesman, whatever it is. But if you have that calling and that urge to be generous, then obviously all those resources assist in finding these individuals. And I try to be careful using the term rescue. So we enable rescues and arrests. We partner with multiple agencies and organizations, training and intelligence gathering to assist them to go out there and rescue these individuals and facilitate these arrests. We're not out there kicking in doors, okay?
Right.
Yeah. But even though we want to sometimes, that rescue though looks very different depending on what we're talking about. A lot of times it requires 7 touches is kind of the space what people talk about, because most victims won't see themselves as victims. And it'll take 1, 2, 5, 7 times interacting with that person before they'll actually want help and identify as like, well, maybe I can't do this on my own. And I don't know when I meet them if I'm the first, the third, or the 7th, right? It's just disrupting that pattern of abuse and disrupting that exploitation. And so for a rescue, say in the country of Honduras, the legal age of consent there is 14. Sex work is legal. So if we identify a 15-year-old that's being that's involved in sex work, if she doesn't identify as a victim, then we can't help her, right? So a rescue to me is being able to sit a person down in front of me, and perhaps it's the first and only time in their life that they actually have a choice. I want to be able to give them that choice. I can't control their choice though. So it's just disrupting that pattern of abuse and giving them a little bit of space to breathe and the resources necessary to take back control of their life should they choose.
Wow. So how do they find you?
So you can learn more at Mission 991, mission991.org. We also have Facebook up, and people can email me directly at Julian Diaz, JulianDiaz, at mission991.org.
Okay. Well, man, thank you. What is one thing, kind of an end thought, that you want everybody that listens to take away from this today?
I just want them to know that it's a very, very real problem and that you're not as passive as you think you are. The majority of people listening to this have at one point in time and actively participated in pornography. And, so have I. I've worked through some stuff in my maturing as a man, as a father, and you have to know that it's not a victimless event, right? Like there's somebody on the other end of that screen. When you go to a strip club, when you participate in some of these, industries, there are people's lives being pulled into that. But the same is true when you go shopping at Walmart, when you go shopping at Target. We vote with our dollars. And I really want people to understand that you have control more so than you think. And so we're not going to change the course of humanity by, shopping at this place or buying this thing or the other. But there does come a responsibility and an accountability with the way we conduct ourselves in our day-to-day life. And what I tell people is, if I run a, sheet metal company and I profit $200,000 a year, it's a pretty decent sized little company. You're probably purchasing over $1 million of raw material out of China every single year, right? So with that $1 million, that's power, that's accountability. Have you ever said, you know what, I'm going to come visit the location that I draw my raw materials from, right? I'm giving you over $1 million per year.
Yeah.
So, I'm just going to show up, next month and take a look around. If they're not willing to open their door for you, you probably don't need to be doing business with them.
Right.
And the more accountability and ethical business management that we start doing, and for the young people listening out there, you're going to be these business owners. For the other people listening, we vote with every dollar, because ultimately that is what drives this whole industry.
Yeah. Wow. Well, man, thanks so much, Julian, for coming on today. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification button. Share the episode with others. Guys, thanks for tuning in.